My name is Alara Vance. I'm 32 years old. At least this one might actually make something of herself. That is what my father said, standing over my hospital bed 6 hours after I gave birth to my daughter. My husband, Caleb, clenched his fists. My mother-in-law, Miriam, grabbed his arm. My own mother, Judith, stared out the window like she'd gone deaf. And me? I just held my baby girl against my chest and smiled. 'Cause for over 30 years I'd been the invisible Vance. The one who sat at the end of the table. The one whose name came up only when someone needed something done quietly. But for the last 5 years I'd been keeping a secret. And if it ever came out, it would flip everything my father believed about this family upside down. I didn't plan what happened at that brunch. I just finally stopped pretending it didn't hurt. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. And if you're watching right now, drop your city and your local time in the comments. I'd love to know who's out there. Now, let me take you back 5 years to the night I found out my parents were about to lose their house. 5 years ago, I was 27. I just finished my advanced nursing certification, 10 months of night classes after 12-hour ER shifts, studying in my car during lunch breaks because the break room was always full. I called my father, Sterling, the day I passed. He picked up on the 4th ring. I told him. There was a pause, 4 seconds, maybe 5. And then he said, "That's nice. Hey, did Brooks tell you he got promoted?" Regional sales director. They gave him the corner office. That was it. My entire accomplishment swallowed whole by my brother's job title in under 10 seconds. I wish I could say that was unusual. It wasn't. Growing up, there was a pattern in the Vance house. I'd bring home honor roll. Dad would mention Brooks's baseball trophy. I'd get accepted to nursing school on a scholarship. Dad would spend dinner talking about Brooks's new apartment every single time like clockwork. My name was a bridge sentence to get back to my brother. Thanksgiving that year made it crystal clear. We were all at my parents' place, the same split-level ranch in Indianapolis they'd had since 1989. Turkey, stuffing, the works. Dad stood up, raised his glass, and gave a toast to Brooks. He said, "The pride of this family." Everyone clinked. I sat at the far end of the table next to the bowl of mashed potatoes nobody touched. My mother reached under the table and patted my knee. "He doesn't mean it, sweetie," she whispered. But she didn't say a word to him. She never did. I told myself I was fine. I told myself it didn't matter. Then Caleb showed me something on his laptop that changed everything. Caleb, my husband, is a structural engineer. Steady hands, steady head. He'd been helping my parents fix things around their house for years. Leaky faucets, sagging porch steps, a cracked foundation wall in the basement. Dad never thanked him, but Caleb went anyway because that's who he is. One Saturday, Caleb drove over to replace a corroded pipe under their kitchen sink. Mom was at the grocery store. Dad was napping in his recliner, and sitting right there on the kitchen counter, half hidden under a coupon flyer, was an envelope from the mortgage company. Caleb wasn't snooping, it was open. The red print was hard to miss. 3 months past due, 60 days to resolve or face foreclosure proceedings. He took a photo with his phone. That night he showed me. I couldn't breathe. My father had retired early at 60. His back gave out after 3 decades at the plant. He told everyone he was set, comfortable, that his pension and savings had it covered. "Vances take care of themselves," he'd say whenever anyone asked. It was a lie. His pension covered maybe 55% of their expenses. The rest had been bleeding out of savings for 2 years. Called Brooks, figured maybe we could split something. His voice got tight immediately. "Yeah, I've been meaning to help, but things are tight right now. The divorce, you know." I knew. Brooks's ex-wife got the condo, Brooks got the debt. The golden child was drowning, too. He just had a nicer suit on while he sank. I lay awake that whole night staring at the ceiling fan going in slow circles. I hated how my father treated me, but I couldn't watch my mother lose her home. So I called the one person I trusted with money, my mother-in-law. Miriam is Caleb's mother, 60, widowed, retired from a career as a CPA. She's the kind of woman who can calculate a tip to the penny without looking at her phone. She doesn't waste words, she doesn't waste money, and she doesn't tolerate cruelty. I sat at her kitchen table and told her everything. The overdue notice, the pension gap, Brooks's silence, Dad's pride. Miriam took off her glasses, set them on the table, and looked at me for a long moment. "If you're going to do this," she said, "do it right. Don't let them know." She introduced me to Beatrice, a financial advisor she'd worked with for years. Quiet, precise, trustworthy. Within 2 weeks, Beatrice set up a modest trust that would route a monthly transfer of $3,000 from my savings into my parents' checking account. On their end, it would show up as a supplemental plant benefit. Clean, untraceable without digging. Caleb held my hand the night I signed the first authorization. "You sure?" he asked. "No," I said. "But I'd rather live with this than live with guilt." The first transfer hit in January. That same week, Dad called Brooks. I heard about it later from Mom. "Looks like the benefits office finally fixed my payout," Dad had said, proud as ever. Brooks's response? "See, I told you it would work out." Nobody thanked me. Nobody even knew. And that became the shape of the next 5 years. $3,000 a month. 60 months. Keeping the lights on in a house where my name was never the one they toasted. 2 years in, the transfers kept going. Quiet, automatic, invisible. Over $70,000 and change. Nobody knew. Nobody asked. I didn't keep a running tally back then. I tried not to think about it. Every month, a notification would pop up on my banking app, and I'd swipe it away like a bill I'd already accepted. Meanwhile, the Vance family kept running on the same script. Christmas, 2 years into the transfers, we gathered at my parents' house. Same dining room, same mismatched chairs, same position for me at the end of the table. Brooks sat at Dad's right. His new girlfriend, Sloane, sat at his left, looking thrilled to be included. After the ham, Dad tapped his glass. He had an announcement. "I've been thinking about the future," he said. "When I get older, really older, someone's going to need to handle the family finances, make the big calls. So I'm putting Brooks in charge." He said it like he was passing down a crown. Brooks nodded solemnly as though he hadn't maxed out 3 credit cards buying a boat he never used. Then Dad looked at me, not with cruelty exactly, but something worse, pity. "You just focus on your little job, Ilara. Leave the big decisions to the men. That's how this family works." A few people chuckled, the nervous kind. Mom studied her napkin. Sloane glanced at Brooks like she was waiting for him to object. He didn't. Under the table, I was squeezing my water glass so hard my knuckles went white. Caleb placed his hand on my thigh and pressed gently. A quiet signal, "I'm here." I thought the worst was over. Then I got pregnant and everything escalated. 5 months along, I announced it in the family group chat with a photo of the ultrasound. Mom was ecstatic. Heart emojis, prayer hands, happy tears. Brooks texted, "Congrats, sis," and then immediately pivoted to asking about borrowing the family cabin. Dad's reply came 40 minutes later. 6 words. "Hope she's got Caleb's brains." I stared at that message for a long time. Read it 3 times. Showed it to Caleb. He didn't say anything, just set the phone face down and walked into the other room. That night, at my 20-week checkup, I sat alone in the dark ultrasound room while the tech went to get the doctor. The screen still glowed with my daughter's profile. I put my hand on my belly and whispered, "I promise you'll never sit at the end of the table." 3 months later, I was in a delivery room, drenched in sweat, holding my daughter for the first time. The hospital room was warm, the kind of warmth that makes everything feel thick. Sla had been on my chest for 2 hours. She weighed 6 pounds 11 ounces. Caleb sat beside me, his hand on the edge of the bed. Miriam was in the armchair knitting. Mom had arrived earlier, teary and quiet. Dad showed up 4 hours late. Traffic, he said. He didn't hug me. Didn't congratulate Caleb. He walked straight to the bed, looked down at Isla, and tilted his head like he was inspecting a used car. At least this one might actually make something of herself. The room went silent. Kind where the oxygen leaves. Caleb stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor. Miriam was already on her feet, one hand on Caleb's shoulder. Not now. Mom turned to the window. I looked up at my father. He was smiling, that half-smile he wore when he thought he was being clever. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just held Isla a little tighter and said, "She already has, Dad. She's here." He waved his hand, a flick like brushing away a gnat, and turned to Mom. "When's Brooks coming? I want him to see his niece." He stayed 20 minutes. He never held her. The door barely clicked shut before Caleb was in the hallway. I heard a sharp thud, fist against drywall. Then Miriam's voice, "Not here. Not now." A minute later, he came back, knuckles red, eyes wet. He knelt beside the bed and pressed his forehead against my arm. "I'm done watching him do this to you." Miriam sat back down. She folded her knitting and looked at me with total clarity. "Sweetheart," she said, "you've transferred over $180,000 to that man, and he walked into your recovery room and said that." I looked at the ceiling and blinked hard. "I know." The room went quiet, just the monitors beeping and the hum of lights. Then I spoke, not loud, not angry, just level. "He's planning a brunch for the baby. A big one. Neighbors, everyone." Caleb shook his head. "You don't have to go." "Oh, I'm going." Because if he's going to use my baby to perform his perfect family show, he should at least know who's been funding the stage. 2 weeks after Isla was born, I made a phone call to Beatrice. "I need a summary," I said. "Every transfer, every month, every dollar. All of it." The email arrived the next morning. 60 line items. Total $180,000. Clean documentation. The kind of paper trail that doesn't leave room for arguments. Dad called on a Tuesday evening about the brunch. 30 guests, he said. "I reserved the chairs. I'll handle the speech. You just bring the baby and smile." "Can I say a few words too?" I asked. A beat of silence. "About what, Alara?" "Let me handle it. I know what people want to hear." Then I heard his voice drop, thinking I couldn't hear him as he spoke to Mom in the background. "Make sure Brooks sits next to me at the head table. Alara can sit with the cousins. My daughter's welcome party, and I was being assigned to the overflow table." I ended the call and looked at Isla. I texted Caleb, "We're going to that brunch. Bring your phone and ask your mom to print the backup." Sunday morning was bright and clear. My parents' backyard looked like a magazine spread, pink balloons, white tablecloths, a welcome baby Isla banner. 30 guests were there, including Aunt Doreen, Dad's younger sister who has no filter. I saw the seating immediately. 2 long tables. The main one front and center had place cards, Dad at the head, Brooks to his right, Mom to his left. The second table, smaller and pushed toward the back fence near the recycling bins, had no place cards. That's where I was supposed to sit. Aunt Doreen spotted me. "Honey, why are you all the way back here? This is your baby's party." "Ask Dad," I said. Dad waited until every plate was full. Then he stood, tapped his glass with a butter knife, and gave the smile he saves for audiences. 30 years, Dad began. "I've been waiting for this family to give me a granddaughter." He pointed at Brooks. "Your turn next, son." Laughter, easy and rehearsed. He talked about Vance values and the legacy. "My son, Brooks," he said, lifting his glass. "The backbone of this family. The one I know I can count on." Then Dad's eyes found me at the back table. And Alara, well, we all know she's the quiet one. I just hope little Isla here got her drive from Caleb's side of the family. A ripple of nervous laughter. Dad walked toward Caleb, who was holding Isla. He studied her face like he was reading a resume. But look at her. Strong chin. This one's got potential. More than her mama at that age, I can tell you that. He laughed alone. The yard went quiet. People suddenly became very interested in their fruit salad. I sat at my table, both hands flat. No trembling. I looked straight at my father and waited. Brooks stood up next, lifting his real glass from the main table. To Dad, he said, the man who keeps this family together. Everyone drank. Brooks turned to me, grinning. He crossed the yard and clapped me on the shoulder. Hey sis, don't worry. Isla's got the Vance genes. She'll be fine. He walked back to his seat at the right hand of the father. And Doreen crouched beside me, voice low. Are you okay, sweetheart? I'm perfect, Aunt Doreen. Caleb leaned close to my ear. Say the word and we leave. I looked at my daughter. She was watching the pink balloons. I looked at Miriam. She gave me one small, certain nod. I took a breath, stood up, and walked to the main table. Dad, can I say a few words? He looked surprised. Now? We're about to cut cake. It won't take long. He waved his hand. Make it quick. I stood at the head of the main table. Thank you all for being here for Isla, I said. My voice was steady. Dad just mentioned he hoped Isla got her drive from Caleb's side. He's been saying versions of that my whole life. I turned to my father. His smile was frozen. But there's something everyone here should know. Something I've kept quiet for 5 years. Alara, this isn't the time for drama, Dad shifted in his chair. You're right, Dad. It's the time for honesty. Mom reached for his arm. Alara, please. I looked at her. Mom, I love you, but I need you to listen this time. Just this once. She let go of his sleeve. 5 years ago, I said, I found out this house was 3 months from foreclosure. The word landed like a stone in still water. Aunt Doreen's mouth opened. Greg's girlfriend looked at him in shock. Dad's pension wasn't covering it. Savings were gone. The mortgage company had sent the final notice. That's private family, Dad started. I'm not finished. Brooks couldn't help. No offense, Brooks. My brother stared at his plate, his ears turning red. So, I set up an anonymous monthly transfer. $3,000 every single month for 60 months. Whispers spread. Dad's plant buddies set their glasses down. Dad, you told everyone your pension got adjusted. I held his gaze. It wasn't them. It was me. The quiet one. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it. That's ridiculous. I never check your bank account, Dad. I turned to Miriam. She reached into her handbag and set the printed sheet, 60 lines dated and stamped, on the table in front of him. Right then, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. His face went white. A notification from the trust office. Per Ms. Vance's request, the supplemental transfer has been permanently discontinued effective today. Sterling Vance stood at the head of his own table, phone in one hand, printed statement in the other. For the first time in my life, he had nothing to say. Shame finally washed over his face. Brooks pushed back from the table. Wait, what? You been how? And Doreen stood up. Sterling, is this true? Your daughter's been paying your mortgage this whole time. Dad's voice was thin. This is none of your business, Doreen. You just spent 10 minutes telling everyone she'd never amount to anything. Doreen pointed at the statement. I'd say it is my business. Mom started to cry. She wasn't embarrassed. She was crying because she finally realized who had actually been showing up. Dad looked up, his eyes meeting mine. You did this to humiliate me. No, Dad. I did the transfers because I love Mom. I stopped them because I love myself. I'm doing this because Isla is 3 weeks old and I refuse to let her grow up watching her mother be treated like she doesn't matter. Aunt Doreen sat back down and nodded. If you want a relationship with your granddaughter, I said, it starts with respecting her mother. Not because I pay your bills, but because I'm your daughter. My father's jaw worked silently as he struggled to find his voice. I'd only seen him this rattled a few times, usually when he'd lost his grip on a situation. This time I held the reins. I'm not looking for an apology today, I told him firmly. I'm letting you know that the old way of doing things is over. I glanced at my mother. She was frantically dabbing at her eyes with a shredded napkin, her hands shaking. Mom, I love you, and you're always welcome in my home. But I'm done being the family's afterthought. She gave me a slow, solemn nod, not the usual placating gesture she used to keep the peace, but a real acknowledgement of the truth. Brooks remained motionless, while Sloane subtly pulled her chair away from him, clearly wanting no part of the fallout. I scanned the yard, the festive decorations and the rented chairs, all part of a grand performance my father staged in a house he would have lost if not for me. We're leaving, I announced. I walked back to our table, packed up Isla's gear, and checked her bottle with the practiced rhythm of a new mother. Caleb was already standing, holding our daughter with a look of quiet pride. He'd been waiting for me to find my voice for a long time. Miriam approached us, pulling me into a hug that smelled of lavender and comfort. Your father-in-law would have been so moved by your strength, she whispered. I leaned into her, thinking of Tom, the man I never met but whose presence felt heavy in the yard that day. As we walked toward the gate, the crowd of 30 relatives parted in silence. I passed inches away from my father, who was still staring at the bank statement like it was written in a foreign language. Dad, I said, stopping for a second. His eyes were bloodshot as he looked up. I didn't do this for the gratitude, but a little would have gone a long way. We didn't look back. Caleb buckled Isla into her seat, and the moment I shut the car door, the dam finally broke. I cried, not out of sadness, but from the sheer relief of being free. The aftermath was immediate. Aunt Doreen called before we even made it home. I gave your father a piece of my mind before I left, she told me, her voice crackling with indignation. I told him he owes you a genuine apology, not some half-baked excuse. By the next morning, my phone was full of messages. Mrs. Dobson sent Lily's with a note saying she'd never been prouder of a young woman. Even one of Dad's old co-workers, Frank, reached out to him to ask if the rumors about the mortgage were true. Dad hung up on him, but the damage to his ego was done. On Wednesday, Brooks finally called. The usual arrogance was gone. Why keep it a secret? He asked quietly. Would you have actually helped if I told you? I countered. He didn't answer for a long time. I don't know, he admitted. It was the first honest thing he'd said to me in years, the sound of a man realizing his pedestal was built on a foundation he didn't own. Mom told me that after we left the brunch, the party died instantly. The house became a tomb. By that evening, the welcome baby banner was just a piece of plastic flapping in the wind. She eventually confronted him in the kitchen. She saved this roof for 5 years, Sterling, she told him. She shouldn't have embarrassed me like that, he snapped back. You embarrassed yourself the moment you insulted her in front of our friends, Mom countered, using a voice he'd never heard from her before. What did you expect her to do? He didn't sleep that night. A week later, life moved on. Amid the haze of 3 a.m. feedings, Isla gave me her first real smile. I sobbed, this time because for once, something beautiful was happening that wasn't tied to family trauma. I shared the photo with the family. Dad didn't comment, but Mom said he sat on the porch staring at that picture for nearly half an hour. 2 weeks later, my doorbell rang late at night. It was my father, looking exhausted and humbled in his old work jacket. Can I come in? He asked, his eyes avoiding mine. That depends. Why are you here? I'm here because I'm ashamed, he whispered. It was the first time I'd ever heard him speak without an audience or an agenda. I let him in. We sat at my kitchen table, no head or foot, just two people and 3 decades of baggage. I've looked at those numbers every day, he said, his voice trembling. I was scared because you did everything without me. You didn't need me for school, your career, or your home. I couldn't handle that. That's the most honest thing you've ever said, I replied. I made it clear, the money was finished. If Mom needed help, she could call me, but the days of anonymous checks and protecting his pride were over. If he wanted to be a grandfather, he had to show up for the quiet moments, not the big speeches. I'm sorry, Alara, he finally said, his voice breaking. I'm sorry I made you feel invisible. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a beginning. It's been months now. My father is still a stubborn man, but the ice is thawing. He visits Isla every Sunday. He's still learning how to be a grandfather without being the center of attention. Brooks calls to check in. Mom sends cards. And I've realized something. You don't have to burn down your life to stay warm. Sometimes you just have to step out of the shadows. If you've ever felt like the invisible one in your family, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.